As always, before you set about creating any media text, you need to familiarise yourself with the codes and conventions of that media format, with additional genre-specific conventions research where possible. This doesn't mean you must simply reflect the conventions you've observed. Your first of 4 evaluation questions asks you how you've used, developed, or challenged existing conventions. Your research base can include ads for general albums as well as for Digipack albums specifically. I have used both here. In this podcast, I will mainly refer to a sample of adverts taken from these magazines, but I will also refer to the assessment criteria and look at some past IGS examples. Okay, so I'm going to run through 10 common conventions shortly. Before then, a quick point or two on research. Firstly, you want to find general examples, and that's pretty easy. You can pick up a range of music magazines, which is probably the best approach, and scan and photograph the examples you find. You can also do a web search, although you'll find many of the results will be student materials, not least from IGS. List the features you find. It's a good idea to use some form of shorthand so that you can note which ads they appear in. So for example, you could get your image files and give them a numerical file name. You could wait until you analyse more genre-specific examples, but it's useful to have the assessment criteria beside you before you complete your analysis. I haven't separated these parts out in the Vodcast, but you could consider factors from the assessment criteria such as overall layout, font variation, use of register, which basically means language suited for the target audience, how images and text are integrated, framing, cropping, layering, SFX, etc. Plus, it's always a good idea to highlight any specific ideas you might take direct inspiration from. You will need to carefully consider which magazines to place your ads in. All magazines make audience profiles available so that potential advertisers can see if this will justify their expenditure. They will also publish rates for different size ads and different locations within the magazine. So for example, the back page attracts a very high premium. Make sure you consider some smaller ads in magazines that might fit with your secondary audience. The 2014 IGS blogs have some really excellent examples of such research, not least Curtis Tiplady, who set a new high standard for this work. Obviously, make sure you thoroughly identified the full range of potential magazines before declaring which you'll pay to place your ads. You might also be guided by the status of your ad, whether they're more niche or mainstream mass market. Okay, now let's consider 10 common features. We start with the AG's logo, which is usually the largest font element. Consider carefully where to place this in your layout. You will often find that a fan has uploaded a TrueType font for this, which you can download and install for use in Photoshop. An AG's logo can be partially graphic too, as with this Jethro Tull example. Second, and probably the second largest font, is the album title. Start to think carefully about whether you'd use the same font as for the act's name, and again look at where this might be positioned within the overall layout. Third, the product shot and other images. Especially with digipacks, it's common to get a product shot. Look closely at how this is actually done. You'll need to think about how many other images to include. Remember, this is a promotional package, and your evaluation question 2 will ask you how your 3 texts combine. But don't simply default to video screenshots. You could stage additional photographs using mise-en-scene from your video, such as these rather good examples from the 2014 Atomic Kitten production. You'll probably want a range of images for a Digipack lyric booklet as well. Look for and think about layering, cropping, and other special effects, and you'll see several good examples of that, well described too, in the 2014 Faithless production. Fourth, a release date. You might choose here, as an example, to challenge or develop conventions. Many ads are actually very precise with this. Is that a good thing? Having said that, make sure you avoid overly vague language such as out soon. The best coursework productions include a range of teaser ads, which might feature in an earlier magazine edition, or just earlier in the same edition. When you're looking for examples of ads, be on the lookout for teaser ads early in a magazine, leading up to later in the magazine a full main ad. As always, think about the font, the register, which again is the language used and how appropriate that language is for the audience, and the layout. Note that with the change in nature of the industry, we now see some direct tie-ins with the magazine itself. Fifth is something that tends to be a little bit overlooked: contents description. Reread your coursework brief. You are producing an album digipack with a CD and DVD. It's for an album, not a single. A full track listing might be a bit too messy and cluttered, and one of your big challenges with your magazine ad is to get the balance right between detail and layout. So you might not include a full track listing, but you might highlight some of the tracks included, and you almost certainly will give a clear indication of the DVD contents, because that is a main selling point of the digipack. You'll find various examples of what the DVD might actually contain, but probably the most common will be concert footage. If this is the case, make sure you're clear and specific on the date, the location of the concert, and the overall length of the concert footage which is included. Also look out for and consider yourself editionalizing. We do see packages these days that have different alternative covers, some coming with t-shirts, etc., etc. Sixth, we have concert dates. Acts will often reunite to tour a greatest hits album or a repackaged anniversary edition of a landmark album, perhaps with some additional new tracks or alternative versions. My Music Vids blog has many posts analysing the decline in album sales and the growth of concert tickets and merchandise as main income generators for the music industry. Think carefully about realistic, real-world venues. Research similar acts or even past tours by your own act. The 2014 Faithless production made really good and innovative use of this element. Again, you'll see a real variety in how much or how little this is emphasised within the overall layout. Seventh, URLs and social media. The assessment criteria on register is a real factor here. Do we really need www or facebook.com to be written out? With social media trends being prone to rapid change, think carefully about which to include and which to exclude. Be clear on this and your decision making to help evidence your audience research as well. Look at the size, the font, and the positioning of icons and URLs. You might also see some examples of QR codes being used. Eighth, we have reviews, sometimes also referred to as puff pieces. Think about which magazine or other media might give a review and which might reflect the interests of your target audience. Again, this is quite useful for the assessment criteria of register. Ninth, we have record label, and when thinking about URLs and social media, think about whether you would actually feature those of the record label itself, which is quite common. We will see many adverts where it's an advert for general releases by a record label. 10th and final, we have retailers. You will see in quite a few examples an iTunes logo, perhaps Amazon or Play.com, which might infer an exclusive arrangement with one retailer. Play.com, for example, will often release digipacks which are not available elsewhere. They will be an exclusive Play.com release. A quick note on spelling. I usually spell this P-A-K. You will also see digipack with P-A-C-K. The choice is up to you. It's also worth making a note of any examples of interesting ideas or designs, such as this one.
Uh-huh. Thank you. Thank you very much. You've been watching a DB3 production.